Hello, everybody. My name is Mitzi Keating. I am a partner at Citrin Cooperman, and I'm the founder and co-practice leader of Citrin Cooperman's Cannabis Advisory Services practice. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about inventory costing and why it's so important. Certainly, inventory costing, when you get into cannabis, especially for cultivators and manufacturers, becomes a little bit more of a challenge for those within the industry for a number of different reasons. First and foremost, as you're well aware, in the cannabis industry, you're only able to deduct your cost of goods sold, which is really an adjustment to income. It's not actually a deduction on your tax return. So there's an extra layer of importance when it comes to making sure that you're costing your inventory appropriately. If you're a cannabis cultivator or you're a cannabis processor, every single dollar that you're able to allocate properly into the inventory is able to be one that you can take as a tax deduction in this very limited tax deduction world. So what are some of the other reasons and difficulties that you kind of encounter in cannabis costing? Well, there's plenty of them, and there's numerous reasons why you need to make sure that you understand exactly what's going into the cost of your cultivation, especially in your flower. And then as you move that flower into the processing process, what's in your distillate? What are you looking at in terms of how much does it cost you to actually produce a gram of distillate that then later might be infused into edible products? And maybe you're selling the distillate on your own. Well, some of the main reasons that you need to make sure you know what your costing, happens to be is really for business purposes. If you are actually producing at a cost that is lower than what you're able to sell it for, that's when you make profit, which is exactly what the point of business happens to be, is to make a profit based upon the products that you're actually producing and selling. However, if you don't actually properly allocate your costs to the inventory products that you're producing, you may be producing products that you're selling at a loss. And you may not know that because you've kind of lumped all of your costs together and you haven't really allocated them to each process along the way or to each product that you're producing. So we find that a lot when people get into cannabis with regard to cultivators and processors, that the impetus at first is really just trying to get a license. So oftentimes those elements of costing your inventory are really just not thought of up front. And it's really important that you get your kind of books in order, your proverbial books in order and literal books in order prior to you actually really starting to produce product. Again, for multiple reasons, whether it's cash flow related to your tax impacts of selling these products, or it's really related to which products are really your high producers and your high margin products. You may find, for instance, that if you're producing flower, you may have problems with your yield. You may not know that your products aren't necessarily yielding as much flower as you think they might be doing. But if you're properly costing your inventory, those are some of the things that you actually can kind of decipher as you look through the books and records and look at your margins and look at what it's actually costing you to produce that flower to determine whether or not you have product problems somewhere along the line. So it's kind of interesting. I think what we find with our clients is that we oftentimes can tell them of problems that they weren't necessarily aware of as we start to cost their inventory. So for example, if we have a flower room where there's actually there's a problem when we get into, say, the vegetative state in a cultivator, and there's a lot of destroyed products. Well, as those destroyed products, if we're kind of going on a typical cycle, we'll have clones, they'll move into the veg state, they move into the flowering state, they move into the drying state, but there's kind of a hole in that process, and maybe we don't know why we're not producing as much flower as possible. And if production's not talking to the accounting department, and we don't have that proper coordination between production and between accounting, then we're going to end up in a situation where we might not actually be able to identify those problems until it's kind of too late. And you might end up in a situation where your flower costs are being allocated to a lot fewer production grams, and therefore your cost to produce those products is going up. And maybe it's just a blip, but it helps you identify those problems. The problem, I think, with accounting in a cannabis situation is that it really truly is cost accounting. And in some instances, some clients may decide that they want to do standard costing and then compare their standards to actual. Other clients may want to do a more actual basis based upon what are we producing in a given month, what are the costs that we're absorbing into inventory given that month, and we're going to shake out those variances on a very monthly basis or a regular basis. But we help our clients with all of those different aspects. And although it sounds a little bit more mundane and a little bit more technically accounting related, right, or technical accounting related, it really truly comes down to, do you know what your business is doing? And there really is a correlation between costing and between production. And oftentimes, as I mentioned, we can kind of find those problems before they get to be too big. So, I mentioned too, the importance of ensuring that you have proper deductions for cultivators and manufacturers. And it all ties back in as we can only deduct the cost of goods sold. So there's a lot to be said about making sure that your inventory is properly costed. It's not an easy task if people don't understand the process of production, or maybe you're using a CPA firm that's never really dealt with cannabis accounting. You won't find that they have the insight that really comes with costing the inventory, seeing what the typical problems happen to be able to make the best business decisions. So again, kind of a brief overview as to why inventory costing is so important. And again, cultivators, manufacturers, cost of goods sold is your only deduction. So we want to make sure that it's properly documented, it's done in a continuously repeatable manner, and it's documented appropriately. So with that, I'll give you the end of this cost accounting 101 in cannabis. And if you want any more quick cannabis talks like this on the latest legislation, news updates, accounting issues, tax issues, just check out our Cannabis Content Hub on the Citrin Cooperman website and sign up for our newsletter with the above link. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.